Fellow classmates, Mr. Watson. This is my video dissertation on my survivability profile. My survivability profile, considering we're a volunteer department, it varies slightly than most career departments around the vicinity. But I'll go through it real quick. Well, not real quick, but we'll talk about it. Right now, first due response, we're getting 2 Class A pumpers, a ladder truck, and 2 rescues, a district chief from Outlying County. If my number one concern happens to be manpower. If I don't have the manpower on my first 2 engines, I cannot take the liability of going interior. Now, I do have other units coming that have qualified personnel on them, but with outside the AHJ, but it sets up a whole new set of guidelines. And they're coming from out of zone, so they're not first due with us. Now, what happens is, say I am running a skeleton crew. It's an officer, a driver, and 1 firefighter, and even it might not even be that. It might be a driver and an officer. What we'll do is set up for immediate exposure protection and defensive operations, if that allows. Now, offensive operations, what I'd look at is our current SOP is if there is a known rescue within that structure, we do not have to abide by the 2 in 2 out rule. We do have incoming units that will establish it, but they do not have to be on scene. So what happens is, once they don't arrive if they're coming, and or the officer will advise them that their duty is to be on RIT while we go in and make a search. It'll be coordinated with fire attack at the same time. Search and fire attack will be coordinated at the same time. Now, if conditions allow, and I do have a fully staffed crew, now what I start looking at is the percent of involvement right away. Percent of involvement. If it's 50 or above or 60 or above in areas of the house where you would be at that time of day, I'm going to start thinking defensive operations if it's above 60%, because by the time I lay a line, by the time I get a water supply established, by the time I have RIT established, and by the time I have accountability and safety set up, it's going to be growing. So a quick exterior so we can go defensive to offensive rather than just go offensive in that manner. And what we've learned from just doing similar offensive operations from the exterior, just through this class alone, I'm actually teaching that. It's a great tactic for like a 3 or 2 man crew. But what happens is, now that we have, let's say we have less than 50% time of day, it's 8 o'clock at night on a Sunday. You could pretty well establish the fact that time of night and on a Sunday that somebody's going to be home. So we'll do a search operations. It'll probably be the first 2 engine company will coordinate fire attack and search operations at the same time. And the truck company, if we want to go ahead and just do fire attack, the truck company, which would be first due, would operate as a search team. Now, most of our houses out here in our zone are also 3-story houses, predominantly 3-story houses, and they're all on the beach, and they all have wind conditions that I have to tend to, and they're all close together, so I have to worry about every single exposure. There's probably not a house that I could go to where I wouldn't have to worry about all of those factors. Time of night, I get the seaward winds coming off the Gulf, and I have to worry about exposures. Now, my second due engine, after they establish water supply, what they would go through is they're going to establish water supply, and they're going to set up for exposures. If I'm going for defensive operations, they'll also meet defensive operations as well. So I'm looking at smoke conditions, fire conditions as soon as I get there, probably within the first 30 seconds. I can see all 3 sides of the house. I have to make my full walk around the building to make sure that no safety is involved, and then if fire conditions allow, which is I'd probably lean towards less than 40% due to manpower, I'm going to go ahead and initiate a search and a fire attack at the same time, which you risk a lot to save a lot, and you risk a little to save a little. So that's what I would look for. We have a couple ALFs that are strategically placed throughout our zone in little houses, and those are automatic searches all the time. Now, I'm talking it varies by the residence and by the type of occupancy too, because if I have a commercial occupants, like I said, that opens from you go to a bar normal time 7 a.m. Or 7 p.m. So if they they probably open at 4 and staff is still there until 3 o'clock. You have to worry about that too. So it's all a variance in the different types of structures that I go to and the different type of occupancies. Now back to the ALFs. The ALFs, I'll probably lean towards more 60% and less to go interior operations. Now I can always do VES operations, but these type of occupancies are hard just because they're disabled. They're disabled people inside there that cannot fend for themselves to get out of a structure on their own. So I'll be striking out multiple alarms just for manpower alone. And again, everything always seems to come back to manpower. Now, if I have heavy fire conditions on the A side of the structure or B side of the structure and not so much involvement in the rear, I can make a coordinated fire attack through the C side of the building with a coordinated search through the C side of the building. We always, we're taught the old tactic to always fight fire by yourselves, but you can always search from the unburned side as well, just to get close as you can and back out. Now that's if engine company operations allow. So a lot to think about right when you first arrive on scene. And back to the wind on the beach here, every exposure that I have, that's going to be an offensive operation by itself. I will automatically go, if I have a structure that's more than 60% involved or 50% involved on the beach, then I will automatically go to an offensive operation on those exposures just because they're that close. I'm talking all my houses out here are probably, I'd say, a good 8 feet. And just the winds alone will make it a difficult task. So I will designate another crew from another engine company, usually from outside AHJ, and they will come and deploy search operations within each immediate exposure if fire conditions allow, while we set up defensive operations on the fire attack house itself. So that's how our zone runs it. Usually, most of the fires we catch out here, they're usually about 30% involved because we have such a quick response time. It really helps out with our response time. I'm talking probably 45 seconds to a minute is our response time within zone. Our furthest house that we have is 4 minutes. I know I've talked about that before, but our response time helps quite a bit. And I have 3 other stations outside of the AHJ that are within the same. One runs from Pasco County, one from the old Spring Hill Fire Rescue, which is now Hernando County Fire Rescue, and I have another station that's Hernando County Fire Rescue within the same response zone, and they're coming. So I know I have plenty of manpower. It's just the extent of time that they're going to get there is what reaches my offensive or defensive strategy. Now I can always go defense to offensive, but you do run the risk of finding a victim or instead of a patient. So you always have to run that risk. But I'm not going to risk a firefighter's life or myself or anybody else for a 70% involved structure with smoke and flames venting through the roof. It's another topic I haven't touched on. If you lose the roof, you lose the house. We don't have a lot of attic spaces up here. It's usually already in the roof. It's all light frame construction. So as we know, 5 to 10 minutes of failure at 1,000 degrees, if you have heat and smoke venting through the roof already itself, you've gotten there. So you lose the roof, you lose the house. So that would be a primary defensive operation, and we could knock it down. And even then, the structural stability of the house alone after a defensive attack, it's still not structurally sound enough to go into search. So we'd have to deem it structurally safe. So that's primarily what our survivability profile is based on. It's based on manpower. It's based on fire conditions as soon as we get there and the complete involvement of the house. Like I said, flashover conditions, if they're imminent and the house hasn't already vented itself, we'll probably go ahead and vent ourselves, go for defensive operations, and move to interior operations after that, or offensive operations. So that is my video dissertation. I hope I hit all the correct things on my survivability profile, but that's pretty much what it's based on. There's so many different factors that I have to deal with as far as wind exposures, time of day out here. Most of it's a retired community, so they're always home out here. They're always home. It's a retired community, or they're doctors when they're never home. But we know most of our citizens out here, so that's how we base it on. And thank you.